The last time that I talked about Halo Infinite on this channel was nearly 2 years ago. The second season had just been revealed, and at the time I was pretty pessimistic about the game's future. And kind of as time passed and the updates released, of course the game got better and better and better, very slowly, especially at first. And as of the time of me recording this, it seems like the seasons are generally done for Halo Infinite, and now we'll just be getting smaller, more focused updates for the remainder of the game's lifetime. Which does suck on one hand, but also I get it and I'm not entirely mad about it. I feel like a lot of people are generally kind of over Halo Infinite at this point, including myself. I've played it, I've had my fun, but as we'll talk about later, it didn't really hit a lot of what I needed that game to hit for me as an entry in the series. That's a discussion for later though, and we'll talk about it. For now, let's talk about the big improvements that this game has made in the past couple years. For me, the biggest one is probably just the increase of game modes and playlists and all the classic Halo modes that should have never not been in the game at launch, but like King of the Hill is always fun. I actually really like Extraction. Land Grab is something they added, which I think seems a little derivative and I don't really think it needs its own, point in the game, but whatever. Last Spartan Standing, whenever that came out and was around, that was kind of a cool mode. And Infection, of course, the big one. I do like playing Infection online, I always have, but I have always mainly appreciated it more for the mini-games it offers, jump rope, all that kind of stuff. And I, of course, am glad they finally added it. The Banished theming around it is fine, it's a little bit different than previous modes, so it's kind of cool, kind of sets it apart a little bit, but to me it still feels a little off without the classic shotgun. They never added it, and it's not a deal breaker for me, but right now the mode doesn't entirely scratch that classic Infection itch that I was hoping it would. They also added the mode Squad Battle, which I remember everyone being quite excited about when it launched. And yeah, I hopped on when it dropped, and when I do play Halo Infinite, it's usually one of my regular playlists that I hop into. And it is pretty fun. It's just a classic 8v8 big team battle with no dumb random vehicle drops and on some classic iconic Halo BTB maps. And the maps for this are pretty awesome. Playing Halo Infinite on like Valhalla, Zanzibar, Waterworks from Halo 2, which is a map I had only seen once on something like years ago, that map was really cool to play on, and Exile from Halo 4, which I'm so glad is getting some love since that's, I think, easily one of the best maps from that game, and I just personally have some really fond memories on that map, so it's a cool experience getting to play on them. And I will say, it is pretty funny how this playlist just blatantly demonstrates for me how much better previous Halo BTB experiences were. Just having normal vehicle spawns on some maps that are actually like wide open and give you some space to drive and just feel like they're more designed for fun instead of being weirdly balanced, which that should never be a concern because BTB is the most social of social modes. And it also points out how Squad Battle is cool, but if you hop on Halo 3 instead, you'll get stuff like an actual wheel that turns on Last Resort, or crazy stuff like the elephant on Sand Trap. And either way, Squad Battle was one of the bigger additions to the game that I do appreciate, and like I said, it is one of the more regular modes that I play. However, it is in desperate need of some new maps. I don't think any, unless I'm forgetting some, have been added since the playlist dropped, so maybe let's get like a Blood Gulch in there, Spire, Relic, Sand Trap, Sidewinder. There are plenty of nostalgic options for them to latch onto and put into the playlist. And speaking of nostalgic, they also added a Halo 3 Refueled playlist with some classic Halo 3 maps, which has been pretty fun as well. It is neat once again playing modern versions of like Lockout, The Pit, Guardian, stuff like that, so no complaints there I guess. But the biggest mode, Firefight, it made its way to Halo Infinite. And it is a little bit different here since now the mode is Firefight King of the Hill with a couple different difficulties. And it's Halo Infinite PvE, which I do think is pretty solid. I enjoy the campaign, and I think simply fighting Banished in Halo Infinite is pretty fun. This mode's not exactly breaking the mold, but I've always thought the Firefight is pretty fun, especially in ODST, but Reach as well. And I really like that they threw some squad battle maps in there as well, which kind of helped to keep it interesting, especially when it first came out. However, once again, currently there need to be more maps. And while I am cool with this new version of Firefight existing in this game, I definitely don't think it should be the only version of Firefight in matchmaking. It was always fun in Reach getting to choose between some options like Arcade Fight or Generator Defense, or some ones with set loadouts, or more like serious survival based modes. And thanks to Forgeable AI, we've seen just how many different modes and versions of Firefight people have come up with. So if they could introduce some of those into matchmaking, it would go a long way, since I am starting to get a bit bored of just the one mode with the current map pool. Other than that, I do think there is a generally healthy amount of playlists in the game at the moment, certainly an improvement from the lack of a Slayer playlist at launch. And ranked is a little different, since the weapon switched from the BR to the Bandit Evo I think like a year ago or a couple months ago, but other than that and some new maps, it's relatively the same. Of course, the way it matches players together in ranked based off of your MMR is still broken, but not surprising. Before we get into other big additions, I do want to mention Forge and Customs. Obviously Forge and the file browser dropped, and I really haven't spent much time at all in Halo Infinite's version of Forge, since I kind of left all my forging back in Halo 5, and that was about as complex as things really got. But from everything I have heard and seen from the Forge community, it just seems incredible. And this is clear from the creations that people have made, and this really was the first pump of life back into this game for me. When they dropped Forge and the file browser, it gave me probably the most fun I have ever had in the lifespan of Halo Infinite. Everyone was so genuinely excited, you could feel it, and I remember like trying to coordinate custom games in Discord servers and hearing everyone talk about it, and the struggle of inviting people over Discord since the customs browser wasn't out yet. And everyone was just so hyped to be playing Slayer on Blood Gulch and Valhalla. We set up like an Honor Rules infection since that wasn't out yet. And it was like things were broken, maps were being thrown together just to have something to play on, and everything was a mess. But everyone was laughing and having fun, and there was just such a clear sense of community during then. And it really was the only time that I ever played Halo Infinite and got that 360 customs nostalgia rush kind of feeling. And it was just awesome. And then the customs browser dropped, which was great as well. And then the cherry on top was, of course, Forgeable AI, which I remember dreaming about back when I was like 10 years old, back when Reach was coming out. And like I mentioned, the community is insane from what they've been making. They're remaking old missions or old firefight experiences, Pokemon battles. My friends and I did like the Bloons Tower Defense one, which was really impressive. There were some genuinely incredible creations, and it's just so cool seeing the natural evolution of these Halo features and what people are able to do with them. And I will say the customs browser is great. That's obviously something that should be a staple in Halo now, but at least in my experience, the Halo Infinite one is not very active at all. I feel like the population just isn't there, and it makes it hard to find a lot of different customs to join. And honestly, I feel like I have an easier and more reliable time joining customs on MCC, which is really upsetting since, like I said, the tools are there now for some really cool creations. Let's talk about some of the concrete new additions to the actual game, like maps made by 343, which, there'll always be some good ones, some bad ones, but I do want to shout out a few. Catalyst was the first, I believe, new map that they ever added, so it'll always have a special place in my heart, and I do really like the look of it. I really, really enjoy Oasis as a BTB map. Cliffhanger is cool, relatively positive map. Forest is a visually beautiful, classic kind of feeling map to me that I really like. And then Season 5 came, and they added Forbidden, which has a kind of similar Halo 2 Installation 05 aesthetic to it, which I really like, and Prism, which is just one of the coolest Halo maps I have ever seen. It has such a neat visual style to it. The skybox is beautiful, the Needler crystals are actually functional and damage you, and the Needler variant on the map is just so much fun. I just love it. I absolutely am in love with it. It's just a perfect social map, and I wish there was more stuff like it in the game. And we did get kind of one more really social focused map with Illusion recently, which I also thought was very creative and cool and had some fun little gimmicks to it. And other than that, all the other maps I'm pretty much indifferent on. In terms of sandbox items like weapons, equipment, and vehicles, it's really, really bad actually. We've gotten one new weapon, two if you want to stretch it I guess, being the Bandit and the Bandit Evo, which is basically the DMR and then the DMR with its actual proper scope. And that's fine if you want to put it in the game, make it the official starting weapon of ranked and stuff. That's cool, whatever, I don't really care. But come on, after 2 years, that's the only weapon you've put in the game, one, and it's not even a new weapon. It's the DMR. That's crazy. I'm just so bored with this weapon sandbox. One, because it hasn't been updated at all, but also because the initial sandbox when Infinite launched was so stripped down from the previous games that now it's just kind of a bore. Maybe add in the plasma launcher, fuel rod, brute shot, the original shotgun. Halo 5 all its flaws, it was killing it when it came to adding in the CE pistol, the Halo 2 BR, just stuff like that. Or you could bring back maybe the Spartan laser and rework it to better fit into Infinite Sandbox. So while the lack of weapons does suck and is a huge problem, the thing I'm more upset about still is vehicles. There has not been a single vehicle added, not one, since this game came out. And yeah, we've all seen the Falcon leaked, or maybe you haven't, but the Falcon has been leaked about 1,000 times at this point, but it's still not here. And it's so lame. And granted, vehicles have improved a lot since the terrible state they were in when they were like paper mache when the game launched, but they've just always felt so watered down and lame in Infinite, and it's just really lame. So maybe let's add in the Falcon or the Revenant, the Goshawk, or I don't know, maybe something brand new or interesting. And I know 343 would never dream of it, but the elephant, come on, the template's there, it's obvious. So yeah, it's really disappointing, and I don't think they've ever even mentioned it on live streams or community updates or anything. It's just, the idea of new vehicles in Halo Infinite it's just never going to happen apparently, unless we do get this Falcon. So I guess it's just going to go down in history as having one of the most boring selections of vehicles in the series. And for equipment, we have 3 to 4, depending on how you look at it. The Shroud Screen, which is a fine addition. The Threat Seeker, which I shouldn't even count since it's really similar to the Threat Sensor. The Quantum Translocator, which is actually pretty cool and does have some fun, creative uses, especially in like objective modes and oddball and stuff like that. And the Repair Field, which I also think has some pretty interesting uses and is, a fine addition. So yeah, not crazy. I still don't really think that's enough, I would say, over 2 years, but whatever. And when you look at all of that I just said, it seems like they really haven't added much that shakes up how you're actually playing each match. The pool of vehicles and weapons looks nearly identical to as it did on launch in terms of new content, which is really upsetting. And speaking of new content, let's talk about an area of the game that has actually been drastically improved: customization. So, customization on paper, when the game launched, seemed pretty good since we had lots of options on stuff like helmet, visor, chest, shoulder, all that jazz. They said reach style customization. We were all, excited little kids a couple years ago when this was going on. And then we were exposed to the myriad of issues with Infinite's customization, like coatings and most of all the core system. And now, nearly all of the armor coatings in the game, helmets, visors, and with this newest update, shoulders, can all be used on all the cores in the game, which is cool. Especially, like I said, shoulders, there are just a ton of options now with the Mark IV core and all of that, with how your Spartan can be customized, and plenty of armor pieces and coatings have been added as well. At some point, they even added in an actual black and green coating, so I could finally, after a year or whatever, make my Spartan look like he did in every other game. We got the SPI armor, the Mark 6 Gen 3, the classic CE Mark 5, some Flood armor, the Mark 4, which all visually look perfect and beautiful, and it is really sweet having all of these eras of iconic Halo armor rendered beautifully in one game together. That is super cool. And yeah, there have been, like I said, some good ones, but generally, over the past year or two, I was never very excited by the content of the battle passes unless it was one of those like 4 or 5 things that I just mentioned. And this is more indicative of a problem that we'll talk about later, but it did feel like a lot of the customization content in the battle passes was just filler or meaningless, or it didn't give like any impact to me. I just didn't care about it. Especially in the past few months, the passes just felt really short and they felt like there was nothing in them. And it's been mostly fine looking armor, just whatever weapon skins, emblems, coatings, stuff like that, but I just was never excited. I would have even been like more hyped about maybe some purple Covenant themed vehicle skins would have been cool or something like that. It really felt like I was just going through the motions doing it, and even when I finished one, it wasn't like a crazy cool reward or something at the end that was really driving me to finish it. I was just move on to the next one and then that was it. And everyone knows this, but unlocking armor through battle passes in Halo, if we didn't know before the game came out, which we all did, we now have years of experience and we know for sure, it's just trashy. You can't work towards anything. You can't aim for splatters to get like the green visor like I did in Halo 4. Instead, I got the green visor in this game. I don't even have it. If I wanted the specific green visor I want, I think it was released in like Season 2 or something, so either I had to have bought it in the store in Season 2, or I'm just screwed, I guess. I guess I'm completely out of luck and I just can never get it. And the actual really exciting cool armor pieces were either cores that everyone got for free immediately, or they were locked behind a paywall in the store. And not for like, $5. No, the Mark V, the beautiful, great looking CE Mark V in this game was $20. And even though that's my favorite armor in the series, I'm not doing that. Or like the Mark IV recently, the vast majority of armor for the Mark IV core is locked behind a paywall. And it seems like the store is always going up and down with prices, and people complain and they'll put it back down, and then after a few months they'll put the prices back up, and it does always seem to find its way with ridiculous and overly steep prices all the time. And yeah, obviously it's a free-to-play game, there should be a store, but the prices they frequently charge, especially with the newest update, are just ridiculous. And due to the seasonal nature of unlocking armor pieces, there's still like hundreds of items in the customization deck that you can see, but you will never be able to get if you didn't buy them all the way back when they were in the store like 2 years ago. Customization overall is generally a lot better than it was at launch because it was abysmal at launch, but it's still feeling the effects of that launch state. Cores are still stupid and still restrictive. You can't put certain chests that you've unlocked on certain cores still. And coatings are still stupid because you can't make simple color combinations that you could make back in 2007. So progress is slowly being made, but no, customization isn't fixed, I would say. It's better than it was at launch, but in a lot of ways the customization of Infinite is still more restrictive than basic Halo 3 and Reach customization from 10 years ago. At least they did add in a progression system, hooray, really hitting the fundamental basics, and yeah, it does what you think it does. It's functional. It does the job of looking at someone's profile and you're like, hey, they've played the game a lot, good to know. Or hey, they haven't played the game a lot, that's also good to know. And you do get the Mark VI Gen 3 armor as the max level reward, which I think is a really fitting choice too. Side note, the UI is still booty. It's just clear how thrown together it was. It's slow, it's not very responsive, especially customizing, like when you go into the helmet or you like enter a core for the first time, it'll like lag a lot and it's consistent. I'm like, how is it still doing this 2 years after the game came out? The horizontal setup for armor customization I just think is less clear and less intuitive than a vertical one. There's still no pre and post game lobbies and it sucks, and a big UI refresh at some point in the past year or so would have been nice to make the game feel a lot more new and refreshed. And we did get a small one at some point I think in the past year, which did help, especially with like where your Spartan was on the main screen. I think that looks a lot better, but there's certainly still work to be done. I also want to talk about two other things before we discuss Infinite kind of overall, and one of those being the live service story, which they ditched in like season 3 or 4 I think, and honestly I just think is really funny, because that season 2 cutscene or whatever one that was one of the most embarrassing things that 343 ever did, which is really saying something. And yeah, obviously I didn't care one bit about the story or those characters, but the fact that it got canned right when that kind of cool cutscene came out, and it's like, oh, let's see where this is going, something interesting kind of might happen. And then after that they just threw it away, which from a management standpoint I'm sure was the right decision. It just is a really funny thing to look back on. So anyways, who cares? They also added in online campaign co-op and fully canceled split screen co-op, which, that was a promise made by Bonnie Ross. She's gone, whatever. I can't believe that. I can't even get into it, everyone knows. But I did do a full playthrough, legendary playthrough with 2 of my friends when it came out, and I was able to replay the campaign and kind of solidify my thoughts on it. And it was fun, I enjoyed it. The good and bad of Infinite's campaign is a whole nother issue, but it is in the game now, it works, sort of. We actually had a ton of connectivity issues playing through it, but once again, not really surprising. I am glad it's in the game, and they even added in a bunch of achievements, which I always appreciate, and I wouldn't mind some par scores and par times being added as well, but I guess that might be kind of hard with the silly way that this campaign is structured. So that's generally it. And taking a step back, what is there really to say about Halo Infinite in February of 2024 and Halo in general? I guess, obviously, it hurts to think back on, June of 2018 when Infinite was announced, and that still to this day was one of my favorite game announcements I've ever witnessed, and there's no need to go through the tragic tale that was Infinite's development, release. We were all there, we remember it, and as we've discussed, I think they have done a reasonably good job of getting Halo Infinite to a roughly content-complete game. They've added in some much-needed content like game modes, maps, Firefight Forge, and are working on fixing big issues like desync. And if Infinite had launched in the state it's in today, back in 2021, when those millions of players rolled in, then yeah, Halo Infinite would have dominated, and we'll never know the effect that really would have had. But that was never going to happen with the way that 343 was being run, and how they were designing this free-to-play live service Halo game, which seems to be the driving force behind many of the game's worst decisions. And some 343 has managed to fix, and some will also keep this game held back forever. And Halo Infinite, when it does end its life cycle, will just be the live service Halo game that didn't go according to plan. And unfortunately, it took a long time for 343 to get their stuff figured out, get rid of all their old leadership, and become now a hopefully semi-functioning studio. They didn't achieve consistent seasonality until a year into the game's lifespan, and once they really got going, especially with stuff like Season 5, yeah, that was a nice beefy live service update, especially for a free game. But the road getting there, thinking back to Season 2, was horrific. And even when they got going, it's clear they still weren't experts in how to do this. The operations or seasonal events have always fallen pretty flat to me. It's usually just a short battle pass with a thrown in game mode and that's it, but a lot of times the theming wasn't even there. And I just always wanted something there to make it feel like a slightly bigger event, or at least felt like it meant more. Change up the title screen a little more, get a bit more creative with the playlists, and there have been examples of them doing this well, but overall it just wasn't it. And other than Forge dropping and Season 5, I was rarely excited about an update coming out in Halo Infinite. And it's been said 1,000 times, but a lot of this is because the content, if you can call it that, wasn't really new content. It was the fundamental basics of previous Halo games. I can only get so excited when you drop Season 4 and it's featuring Infection, but it's a year and a half after the game has come out. That is crazy to me. There was never really a brand new, exciting addition to Halo in this game. Even Halo 5 had Warzone, which had a ton of flaws, but that was something that was, you could get excited about. It was something brand new to the series. Halo Infinite did have Forgeable AI, which is really cool, but that's not enough to be the only new addition of this series in over 2 years of updates. And like I said, some issues with this game will truly never be fixed because they can never be fixed. Codings and cores will go down in history as one of the worst things this series ever did. Progression and customization is still not how most fans would want it because it's a free-to-play live service Halo game. And I think the most frustrating thing about Halo Infinite is the fact that they were so close. They somehow accomplished the hardest part of making a modern new Halo game. They created gameplay that generally pleased most fans. We had all debated for years in YouTube and Reddit and Twitter everywhere about Halo movement and sprint and ADS and equipment, and they somehow managed to create a new Halo game that had fun gameplay. It mostly satisfied all segments of the Halo fanbase, and yeah, Halo Infinite's gameplay does have its issues. It's not perfect, but I do really enjoy it quite a bit, and I know a lot of other people do. And it's crazy that that's the part they got right. They switched up the tone, the art style, the music, aesthetically they got all of that right to be more in line with the classic spirit of the franchise. They were killing it. And then the stuff that had literally been laid out and modeled for them from years of other games, like progression, content, game modes, customization, customs, launch content, co-op campaign, they couldn't have dropped the ball harder on all of that, and that's the stuff that really matters. Yeah, Halo 5 looks gross and doesn't look like Halo, but they got those updates going, and within a year that game was pretty content complete. And, that's the stuff that actually matters. I love Halo Infinite's a beautiful looking game from an artistic level, but the fact that all this content has been drip fed out to us over 2.5 years is crazy. And it really is just truly unbelievable. And it sucks, and we all know it sucks, because they squandered the opportunity for a brand new Halo game so hard. And yeah, the game right now I generally think is pretty good, and as a free multiplayer game that random Bobby can go download and play with his friends, I think it's kind of impressive just how much stuff there is for people that want to give it a random download. Halo Infinite is currently a pretty beefy gaming experience that is 100% free, and that is worthy of praise. But for me and a lot of other fans of Halo as a series, and Infinite as an entry in that series, it did not do it, and it's upsetting to say the least. So, where do we go from here? I have no clue. I don't really know, where, I don't know what I would do if I was in charge. I really don't know. It seems like 343, like we said at the beginning, is slowly winding down big updates, which makes sense. I'm personally fine with them starting to move on to hopefully better things and still support Infinite a little bit longer for those who really enjoy it. And thinking optimistically, it at least seems like the higher-ups at 343 that were largely responsible for Infinite's horrible development are now gone, so that's good. But I'm so unsure of what's next. I obviously still want campaign content more than anything, and I can't even begin to think of what the next Halo multiplayer would even be, because it's just exhausting at this point. But we know that they are seemingly moving on to some new projects, or at least one new project, and have some stuff in the works, so what's it going to be? I have no clue. Maybe we'll see an announcement this year, maybe like in November or something of this year, who knows. I'll probably continue to hop on Infinite every once in a while, especially for updates. Like, I'm kind of curious to see the match composer, and if I'm bored, it still kind of is my, default multiplayer. I'm not really paying attention to much and just play a couple matches once, every couple weeks or whatever. But it certainly won't be a regular thing for me, as Infinite really hasn't been since launch, because all of my friends stopped playing, a lot of people online have dropped off, and there's so much that can be said for Microsoft's mismanagement of the Halo franchise, but that's a video for another day. So yeah, I am curious where Halo goes next, but I probably won't be talking about it again on the channel until something kinda big happens. And I certainly won't be anticipating or hyping myself up for another 343 Halo game ever again. Although I still might make fun of the Halo TV show on the channel at some point, who knows, I feel like it's kinda hard not to. So, all that being said, what do you think about Halo Infinite currently, its history as a live service game, and the future of Halo? Thank you all for watching.